Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die, where my goal is to give you evidence that although our bodies will disappear, we survive physical death. When we aren't afraid of death, we are less afraid of life. From these episodes, I aim for all of us to take more risks in our lives, go after our dreams, have great relationships, and a lot of joy in the process. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the international best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And I'm fascinated, excited, and thrilled to introduce you to a phenomenal individual. This gentleman's name is Mellen-Thomas Benedict. Mellen-Thomas Benedict's near-death experience resulted in perhaps the greatest fundamental transformations of any near-death experiencer ever documented. In 1982, miraculously, he returned to his body with a complete remission from a terminal illness. The advanced scientific knowledge he brought back from his experience led him to numerous scientific discoveries and U.S. and foreign patents. Mellon has invented, prototyped, and developed some 200 concepts and inventions in a variety of fields, from shoes, hand tools, musical instruments, and toys, to electronic devices, health aids, lab equipment, and phototherapy technologies. His products are being used to benefit people in over 20 countries. Mellon is a researcher, inventor in the field of quantum biology, Biophotonics and Cellular Communication, and a lecturer on the subject of longevity, energy medicine, and phototherapy. And truthfully, he has a long list of other credentials that make him an incredibly fascinating man, and we'll find out more about that in this interview. Ever since his near-death experience, Mellon has maintained his direct access to universal intelligence and returns to the light at will. This enables him to be a bridge between science and spirit and has guided him to develop new technologies for health and wellness. It is my greatest pleasure to introduce you to Mellen-Thomas Benedict. Mellon, welcome to We Don't Die Radio.
Thank you for inviting me on your show, Sandra.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you, and to me, you're a superstar, and we haven't met before, and I'm just really excited to meet you, find out about you, and a little bit more about you. Where do we start? I know you've been on interviews for quite a while. Prior to your near-death experience, can you just tell us a little bit who you were and what your life was like and what you were up to, and then maybe what happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had an eclectic kind of career. I spent 7 years right after high school. I went right into filmmaking, so I had about 7 years in feature filmmaking.
Wow.
And thought I was going to be a filmmaker the rest of my life. And then after 7 years of living in hotel rooms and working, I loved the industry, but something left me hollow about it. And so I left the industry and started apprenticing and became a stained glass artist for the next 15 years after that.
Oh, how beautiful.
And, I did architectural pieces, with architects. I did a lot of churches and funeral homes, and so I really enjoyed the work. It's all about details and stained glass, and that really helped me focus because I'm a little bit attention deficit, but it really helped me focus.
And very artistic if you're doing stained glass.
And then I had my near-death experience in '82, and actually kept my studio open till around 91 or 90. But I'd already started, going out and doing these talks and everything. So I wasn't actually home a lot, but my staff could run it. And then I closed my studio finally. And about 19, I'd been coming up with inventions ever since my near-death experience, and about 19, late 80s, about 91 or so, I decided to become a full-time inventor and, move permanently to California where I could get funding and things like that to do, strange things.
So let's go back, because now I'm dying to know. You had an illness of some sort. which something happened to result in that near-death experience. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was 1981. I was diagnosed with a form of actual terminal brain cancer. It was inoperable, incurable at the time, and given about 6 to 8 months to live.
Wow.
And I was completely clueless because I'd never been in any of the situations that were going to follow. You know, I'd never been in the situation where someone told you were terminal. Number one, you know, deal with that. And it's the most surreal experience. One of the most surreal experiences I've ever had is when the doctor told me I was terminal. I couldn't understand the word he was telling me. I just didn't register. You know,
I can't
you
even
never think
imagine.
it's going to happen.
No, it happens to other people.
Right, and then they still, although it was incurable, inoperable, they really wanted to push heavy chemo, and they also wanted me to get surgery. And one thing that changed my life was that when I had my first meeting with the oncologist, and I believe he was a man from India. And I was sitting in his examination room and talking to him about, you know, prepping me for what's going to be happening next. And I asked him, I said, how much time is this going to give me? And he said, he looked around and he closed the door to the exam room or the conference room. And he said, by the third, this is so radical, by the third session, you'll be a vegetable.
Oh, my gosh.
And I said, well, you know, lovely. What can I do? And he said, go home and make your peace. And I had been estranged from my family for a good number of years at that time. And the thought of going home to my family and dying was as bad as dying.
Dying, yeah.
You know, because I'd been disowned. I was I come from a multi-generational military family, and we were expected to join the military, but I chose not to because of Vietnam. And
right.
I call myself a proud anti-war veteran. I'm also a veteran, and I believed Americans should stay here and support the anti-war movement, not run to Canada and hide and pull tricks. My family disowned me. Everybody disowned me, so I never wanted to speak to them again.
Sure.
You know, but talking about being clueless, I had no spirituality really, conscious spirituality anyway. I had been raised in a Catholic boarding school, and I think I've talked to a lot of people who've had a similar experience. It pretty much creates an atheist right there for the most part.
Sure.
But by an early age, I was done with God or any concept of that. I thought it was silly from the world I was looking at and the people I was seeing and dealing with. It was, even as a child, it didn't ring right. And so I just didn't even take it seriously. And I wasn't even an atheist because, you know, an atheist will give you an argument.
Right.
But to me, the whole thing was pointless to even talk about. So I never thought about it again. But and also I was completely clueless in that I'd never even heard of hospice till I ended up in one. You know, and by grace, I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a lot of money, and here I am terminal, and I really didn't know what to do. And a friend introduced me to a friend of hers who had been working with this woman named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Yes, I know about her.
Yeah, and I'd never heard any of this, you know. But it was going to be a safe place to go and die. That was the big thing for me.
Yeah.
So she invited me to come up to the hospice, which was about 4 or 5 hours from where I lived in the mountains. And so I went, moved into hospice. You know, it was a small one. It was a kind of a country hospice. It wasn't a big city thing at all. And that's where, you know, I settled in to die. And so I degenerated on doctor's orders, you know, like Bernie Siegel says, you know, follow doctor's orders. And I had a written will. I did not want to be resuscitated at all. I did want to die to the world at the time because I really had a very bad attitude about the world from an early age. My family was fairly dysfunctional, and fairly, that's putting it lightly. But also, I didn't have any faith in any kind of God or anything, but I was very interested in ecology. You know, ever since Rachel Carson's book came out, Silent Spring.
I don't
this
know
goes back to this. It was the first ecology book that ever came out. It goes back to the 60s. It kind of changed the world. Well, I got that, and it just riveted me. It shifted me. And so I became I guess what you call very interested in ecology. And at that time, all the experts were saying that if humanity stopped everything it was doing then, it was still too late. And then books like The Population Bomb came out and said we'd all be cannibals by 1987.
Oh my gosh!
You know, so it was not good times. But
no.
And I believed it. And I believe, you know, I these are experts. You know, I don't know why we really listen to them. They're more wrong than they are right usually. But so that really hit me in my heart, and and I'll finish that story a little bit later when I tell you about my life review, because I found the seed of my disease that actually related to my worry about the planet. We can talk about that when I tell you about the life review. But so I really thought you know, everything was gone wrong. You know, the world would end in my lifetime, not from a religious point of view, although there are plenty of people out there like that. I call them the end times crowd, you know, you know, and plenty of that going on too. And so I withered away, and in my written will, I wanted to be left alone at least 6 hours, you know, make sure I'm really dead. You know, I hadn't even told my parents anything.
Oh my gosh.
And I knew if I went into a coma, my mother would never let me go. I'd still be on tubes, you know.
Right, and your body's breaking down at this point.
I'm withering away at the end stages. The only thing I could really take in was milk, you know, like a glass of milk, and episodes of pain that just kind of takes you out, but not constant episodes of that, though. It was kind of graceful that way. But in the hospice house, I said they had a library, but they actually had a small bookshelf with lots of books on it, world religions and other stuff like that. And while I was there, I did go through some of those thick books on world religions, trying to kind of, you know, bone up on what might be next.
Right.
You know, and none of it made any real sense to me. I mean, it's like silly stuff, especially the silly stuff reincarnation. It was so silly.
Exactly.
And, so it didn't really resonate with me, you know, but at least I gave it a glance, and you know, but when the day came, I believe it was just after sunrise, and I woke up and I had a knowing that I was going to die very soon. And it's the kind of knowing a mother has about a child or a soldier has before he goes into battle, things like that. It's a clear knowing, and it calms you, actually. It actually calms you down because it's finally here, you know. And they usually didn't come into my room till about 10 o'clock anyway, because I was very weak. And so I sit up, I'm looking at, I thought, what was the sunrise, and I had this clear, like, feeling I'm going to die real soon. I thought, great, you know, let's go. And then the next thing, I guess I went back to sleep. The next thing I remember is a kind of a classic scene where I'm out of my body, looking at my body, and it was so vivid and real, you know. And I'm going, whoa! And there was this kind of vapor of light, kind of like fog, drifting from my body, and I now know that was the life energy leaving, and now scientifically I understand it. It's biophotons. I know in the quantum physics about what that was, but now I understand it. But and I was very confused, and I was surrounded by darkness and just looking at myself in the bed, and then long story short, I was trapped in darkness. I felt alone and very scared, and I thought, is this how it really ends? You end up in a black hole. Is this it? It was a terrible feeling. And because the surprising thing is, you know, you're fully conscious. That's the funny thing about it.
Oh, it's amazing.
Isn't it? You're fully conscious, and I didn't even question that part of it till later. You know, like how could I even think? You know,
right.
And so I felt trapped, and I at one point I was so desperate, like begging for help, that an interesting thing happened. An angel appeared to me, and I don't believe in angels. And actually appeared to me in the way that I perceived angels, which was a golden figurine, the kind you have at Christmas. You put a candle in it or something.
Yes.
And it actually appeared as a golden figurine type of angel, but it was alive. It looked alive to me, and I didn't know what else. I was shocked. I said, "Are you the angel of death?" That's all I'd ever heard, probably from movies, you know. And are you the angel of death? And that's when the angel said, "My name is Mellon, and you need to look at the light." And it pointed to my heart. Like, I didn't see a body, but it pointed to my heart area where it would be. Mm-hmm. And it explained to me that the light starts in your heart and then connects to this other. I saw a dot of light way out there somewhere, that they're connected. And I was panicking. But with the help of that, quote, angel, I found enough focus to focus on the light and make the connection. The Kunas may call that an Akka thread, or a silver, you might call it a silver thread or something, but we're mm-hmm. connected directly, and that light actually starts in our heart. It doesn't start on the other side. It's all connected in what I learned. And so I followed that thread, but for me, it wasn't like a tunnel of light, and because my near-death experience was before the internet, and there's some difference now between pre-internet and post-internet experiences.
Oh, I never even thought that would be so, but okay.
Right, and it shows you evolution, number one, but it mm-hmm. also shows you that more and more people have gotten interested in the subject and are more steeped in it now, and
yes.
and have all this in their head before they have a near-death experience.
Oh.
So what's happening is there's kind of a uniformity happening now, and that happens in evolution. Things are kind of wild at first, and then they evolve into a kind of a standard. But before the internet, the tunnel of light wasn't necessarily that common, and other things like that. So it was a different world in a way. But here I am, completely clueless. I go to this. For me, it was like I was at the bottom of the ocean, the dark part of the ocean, and I could see this light, and it was at the top of the water. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The top of the ocean. And I just it was like I was trying to swim to that light, trying to break the surface, trying to get to that light. And I did make my way to the light, and had this wonderful experience of geez, I don't know what's going to happen here. And so this light was so impressive that I blurted out, "Are you God?" What else would you say?
Sure.
And the light represents, and I've always said this, the light also represents your higher self nexus to all other higher selves on the planet. It's a matrix, and it's a direct connection to the entire network. So the light, you're like talking to yourself. I've called this the great self, the greater mm-hmm. self, of which we're all a part of. We're all a part of a greater self here, a greater life. And so this is why the light seems to know you so well.
Because you're part of it, right?
Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, who knows you better?
Well, and that explains why it's so bright.
And incarnation after incarnation, it's been with you, And,
but you didn't believe in reincarnation.
Well, after I had my conversation with the light,
I'm kidding.
I certainly got it. Because it finally was explained to me outside of the usual, Indian experience or whatever, the yes. dogma. But we can talk about that later.
I was kidding anyway. So.
Yeah, I mean, really. But so the light seems to know you very, very well, and will speak to you at whatever level you're at: child level, adult level, mystical level, metaphor level, wherever you're at. And being an artist and a poet, I live in my metaphors. I live in my poetry, and so my experience represents that. My story represents the way I was looking at things. I don't know what happens when, say, an accountant has a near-death experience. Maybe all the numbers add up. It's euphoria, something like that. But for me, I was a more kind of an artist, free spirit, and had really no dogma that I knew of in my conscious, although I found out I had a lot in my subconscious. But the light said to me when I asked the light, "Are you God?" And I was really thinking maybe I'm in trouble for all the bad things I've said about God, in my life.
Sure.
I used to put people down, but the light said back to me, "Who and what is not God?" And I understood what the light was saying. The entire universe, the entire earth, every atom is the body of what we call God. This is God. You're already there. And it really humbled me. It humbled me to be a part of this that we're a part of,
And those are pretty profound words. Who and what is
yeah.
not God?
And it was perfect for me. I got it, and this is where Ken Ring, and I'm in his book. This is Ken Ring studied me, and he says this is what was different. When I started saying that, I asked the light if I could just stop this experience for a minute. I've got like some questions. I'm a little bit, I'm blown away by all this, and I don't know what's next. So I said, can we take a break, or can I ask some questions? And the light said pretty much, the vibe of, okay, what you got? And that's when I began this great conversation with the light that has remained this 30 plus years to this day. And I was able to ask the light every question I ever had or could think of, and came to a part of the experience where all my questions have been answered. Now, that's all my questions. I don't have all your questions or anybody else's questions.
Right.
So my questions were answered to my satisfaction about the life, the universe, and things I were interested in. There's lots of stuff I'm not interested in, so I didn't ask about it. But so I came to the end of the conversation. But I'll put a bookmark there for a second, and because I think it's important to go back to my life review, which I think I skipped accidentally.
Yes.
Let's go back there for just a second, and then we'll go back to the light. For me, being in that darkness, at a certain point, I guess what we call a life review happened, and it was like going around me in pictures that were like alive. And I'm a photographer and an artist, so this is how it was presented to me. And it started, it was a review of my life that started ticking down from the moment of my death all the way back to my conception, actually. And I was watching all this, and there were dark frames and dark doors, and I didn't want to open them. And you're not forced to even have a life review. Nothing's forced on you.
Interesting.
In fact, if you have a life review, you don't have to look at everything. You don't even have to get it, because there's twofold purpose I'll talk about in a minute about the super importance of a life review. But so mine was ticking away, and I was seeing these moments of my life and how I affected people and how people have affected me. And I saw the seed of my disease. What got me was that I had so personally identified with the world was going to end some way. And one day, back in the 70s, I got a ecology magazine, and I was going through some of the articles, and they had an article that had this two-photograph collage. And one photograph was an aerial photograph of the city of Los Angeles, and the photograph right next to it was a cancer cell. And they looked almost like they almost mirrored each other. It stunned me. And because San Francisco streets are kind of crazy, and it was like streets and avenue. It was like I couldn't believe this. It was so apparent that this was the truth that in my heart of hearts at that moment, and I didn't realize this at the time, in my heart of hearts in that moment, I decided that nature had gone wrong, had accidentally created a malignant cancer that was going to kill the planet, and it was humanity. So, get the metaphor. I'm thinking humans are cancers. My brain is thinking that.
Right.
I'm a human, and believe me, you get more of what you think than anybody else.
Sure. Oh, that's good news and bad news. Okay.
Exactly. That's why you got to watch your worldview, because, and especially if you start telling people these negative worldviews, every time you tell that story, you're getting more of the energy than anybody else.
Oh, wow.
And it comes back on you. And so I really did believe that. And so suddenly I saw in an instant, oh, that's where it came from, And other things about my life review. But getting back to the light, I asked all kinds of questions like, why is humanity? Well, one of the first questions was, why is humanity so dark and doomed, and why even bother creating humans or having humans or a world like this? Why even bother? What's the problem? That doesn't it never resonated with me that was like fair or necessary if you're God Almighty, all knowing, all powerful, all loving.
Right.
Yeah, what's this? Just toying with us. And so I asked the light that question: why is humanity so dark and doomed? And at that moment, the light turned into kind of a mandala. If people don't know what mandalas are, it's almost another way in the West is it's almost like those big round stained glass windows in cathedrals.
Mm-hmm.
And this mandala was alive, and I was taken into the center of it, like the center of this matrix. And it seemed as if I was allowed to look into every human soul that had ever been, including my own. And I could see no darkness whatsoever in our core essence, in our soul.
Wow.
No human that's ever been on this planet has ever darkened the soul, no matter what they've done outside, in the world. And I also learned that you can't be cut off from this. You cannot be disconnected. You can think you are. You can forget about it, but you can never lose it. And that changed me. And when I got when I really got the revelation, and I was like, awed, the light said to me, "Oh, beautiful human." And then I knew we were loved. We're really loved. And our core essence can never be tainted. And some people don't like to hear this, but even the worst person in the world has a pure soul.
I think of Hitler right in my head.
Right. Yeah,
I
mean, people like that.
Sure.
But at the core essence, this is all good. It's the saving grace of the world. Is our core essences produce mostly good and gentle and caring people, not Hitlers.
Right. Yes.
And so that just changed my whole mind right there about the world and everything. Feeling that and seeing that for myself, And I asked other questions like this silly stuff, reincarnation. While we're at it, what about reincarnation? It seems so silly. And the light explained to me that many of the spiritual explanations of it are a bit weak and flimsy, but it's more real than even most spiritual people imagine. It's so real that it's involved in quantum physics. It's involved in your core being. And the light told me that the number one thing that the universe does is reincarnate. Everything reincarnates all the time. When stars die, they create new stars. Mm-hmm. And there was multiple levels. I do a whole course on reincarnation now, but there are multiple levels of reincarnation. It's very interesting. That I was told that when you have a child, you're biologically reincarnating. That's a form of reincarnation. Your ideas can reincarnate. You're definitely your soul essence reincarnates, and it's the one thing the universe does all the time is reincarnate and regenerate. Energy doesn't die; it just goes through transitions.
I think of a log that burns and changes form to heat, or a puddle that dries on a beautiful sunshiny day. It turns to vapor and may become a cloud and then come down as rain.
Yeah. So I really got a good lesson and have many lessons since then on reincarnation from a practical point of view, not a spirit, not a sort of religious point of view. I call it practical reincarnation. And so there came a point where my life review, where my questions were over. I couldn't think of any more questions. And the light asked me, "But what was your first question?" And of course, the light knows me. I understood immediately what that meant. That meant there's a time when we're young that we ask our first serious question about the universe. It may be, why the sky is blue, or Mommy, how did I get here? That kind of question. Yeah. Where you're looking out for the first time outside of yourself. And oddly enough, and I think it's from being in Catholic boarding school from first grade on, being told I'm going to go to hell for eternity, I did contemplate deep subjects like eternity. How long is that? And
a long time.
I like what Woody Allen says, eternity is a long time, except right at the end.
Woody Allen's a nut, yes.
Yeah, but my first question, oddly enough, that I had stuck in my head till I hit puberty, ever since I was in like early grades of boarding school, thinking about eternity and heaven and hell and all that stuff. My first question was, I wondered why we have to die at all. Why do we grow old and die?
Mm-hmm.
That just seems silly. If you're almighty, all powerful, what's all this about? And so I went, oh yeah. So I asked the light, why do we grow old and die? And then two figures. People ask me if I saw any relatives on the other side, and I usually tell them, had I seen any, I probably wouldn't have talked to them. But excuse me.
That's why you didn't see him.
Yeah, right. I wasn't interested.
The light is all wise. Yes.
It was that kind of a fragmented family. But so two columns of light appeared, and out of the right column looked like a strange, small, maybe guy from India, and I heard the word Dinshaw. And later I found out that was Ghirardelli Dinshaw. Dinshaw Ghirardelli, who was the first modern scientific person who started healing people with lights back in the 1919 and
you
20s or 30s.
heard the name in your near-death experience.
Yeah, I heard the word Dinshaw.
Cool.
And
okay.
And after my near-death experience, kind of tried to look all that up. Mm-hmm. But he was the first scientific person to cure people with light, and he invented the first really scientific, professional machines to do it. Light projectors. But he happened to come along at the time, and he was getting quite a reputation when a new upstart organization called FDA picked him as a snake oil salesman and persecuted him pretty hard and heavy. Then, when he was finished downloading all of his information to me, and it was like it was being written, it was like being written in golden letters in my brain. It felt like, inside me. Then the column on the left opened up, and a short, portly guy with a beret, some kind of funny mustache stepped out. And he was very excited, and he started immediately educating me about starlight. And I later found out through PMH Atwater, who's a friend of mine who kind of discovered me in the backwaters,
She's been on this show. She was one of my first guests.
Yeah, we're still friends to this day. But she's sort of the first that really, she was actually the first near-deather I ever met, because I didn't know any near-deathers. I didn't even know the word, basically, until I attended a lecture at PMH Atwater's, and that's when I went, oh,
I'm not alone in this.
Maybe that's what happened. I had no reference point. So, excuse me, I'm get a little drink of water here.
That's okay. I'm thrilled to be listening, because so many of the concepts and questions and things that you're saying, while I'm excited and interested, it takes a little bit for my mind to kind of get around what it is you're saying and put it together, and it's wow.
Well, it's taken me 30 years it's taken me about 30 years to really grok it.
Yes.
Myself, because I'm someone with not much of an education, but it's like I got a scholarship to this great school. I've been going to school ever since. But so this short, portly guy with a beret starts educating me about starlight and electrons and protons, and he was very excited. And then he started drawing this stuff to show me, and it was turned out to be, later I found out, fractal geometry, but he was drawing it for me. And he was telling me that fractal geometry was the mathematics of God, and if you really understood it, you could trace your past lives, your future lives, all your patterns are in there. And, fractal geometry is one of the main sciences today, from entertainment to science. It's a huge, but so it turned out, and it was PMH Atwater that figured this out for me. I couldn't really figure out the guy. She says, that sounds like Walter Russell of the University of Light. And she showed me a picture. I said, that's the guy. That's the guy, because I didn't even get a name for him. I said, that's the guy. And then she took me up to Swannanoa, his former University of Light.
Yes.
I said, ooh, I saw his bust and everything, and I said, that's the guy.
That's incredible. And, I've read most of his books and fascinated by him.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
cool.
I'm a part of that group now, and have channeled Walter a number of times for things. But so he was so busy showing me all this stuff, and it was like indelible in my mind or whatever. And So that ended, and it was time for me to come back. And because by then I understood and believed in reincarnation.
Right.
I really got it. It makes sense to me now. And I felt I was getting heavier, and that's what I call gravity pulling me back. Back. I wasn't told to go back. It was never discussed or anything. I just knew we all reincarnated. So when I started feeling heavy and I was done with the light, it was like I was falling back. And I really thought I was going to start a brand new incarnation, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I was very happy for it. Oh, great. I'd get a brand new start. But I ended up right back in my same body, seems like about with no time gap in my consciousness. So later, days and days later, I would have these visions, and I'd go, what a burn. I thought I was going to get a new life, and here I am back in the same body about the second I left off, And that, I learned a lesson: you can't skip grades.
No, you had more experience. Did you start getting better? I mean, I can't help but think you must have. I mean, it sounded like your time was up.
I did. The first week or two was very strange, especially the first week. I was very multidimensional. I actually didn't know if I was here or there, really. And I had the strangest conversation with my caretaker, who would. I'd be in a chair and she'd walk by like a dream, and I'd say, "Am I alive? Am I alive?" And she would look at me and say, "You were dead. You were dead. I know you were dead." And it really, she was a very nice, unpreachy, genuine Christian, and it just this whole thing completely unnerved her. It just really rocked her world, let alone mine. And then I started, I did start recovering, and then finally, the doctors checked me, and I got kicked out of hospice.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I didn't get tested to months and months later because although people were recommending it, I didn't want to know. Whatever time I've got left, I don't want to worry. I'm feeling different than I've ever felt, and I've got a good picture of everything for myself to, be in this world.
But something obviously happened, because it is now 2014 that we're talking.
I've lived about twice the life I should have, or would have, without that near-death experience.
Wow.
But I'm one of these people that decided not to do any treatments at all. I just fell through the cracks. And there are many people that do that, by the way. And so I was tested months later, and I remember the doctor putting up the scanner slide, and he said, "Oh, this is interesting." And I got chills up my back because oh no, here we go again. That's what I thought.
Terminal, right?
And he said, "Here's your cancer, and the one we just took, it's not there at all. There's no traces whatsoever." And he said, if we'd done surgery or radiation, you'd always see the damage there from the surgery or the radiation. It would always show up in every X-ray or slide you ever did. And I blurted out, "It's a miracle." And he said, no, we call these spontaneous remissions. And I said, "Good enough for me." But when he said that, I said, "Well, what does that mean?" Because I didn't even know what it meant. And he explained to me that in medical records, documented medical records, in every known human condition, there have been remissions. Spontaneously, from adults growing new teeth, MS people, suddenly not having MS, a blind person getting hit by lightning and seeing again. There's, you name it, and that triggered me to the course I've been on ever since to this day, and that was, I believe that miracles have a physical component. If it happens in flesh, there's a mechanism that there's the way it happens. It's not hocus pocus. It's not magic. And so I started looking at what I call the physics of miracles. And my idea was, if we could understand this, maybe we could help people trigger spontaneous remissions. That was always my goal. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we have plenty of evidence it happens, And so he put me on that course, and I've been on that ever since. I was very lucky to get funding and things. A few years later, somebody listened to me and validated me with a world-famous scientist, and he said, "I know what this guy's talking about," And I was actually talking quantum biology and didn't know it. And quantum biology is the cutting edge of science today. As biology, biophysics is a cutting edge of physics today. Biology is going to be the biggest thing ever, but over just chemistry, that kind of thing. And
Mellon,
so I was able to.
I just have to tell you, our time's going by fast, and it's breaking my
Okay.
heart because I'm thinking,
Well, you can cut
no,
it out. Cut it out.
no, like can this be a 2 hour show, and it can't, we can do a part two, but if you don't mind, because there's no
Yeah.
question in my heart of hearts that I'm going to stay connected with you and dig and dig and dig and find out some more of the things that you know and you've learned and
Great.
be able to share that. But when you brought up Walter Russell, and for our
Hmm.
listeners who don't know, Walter Russell did so much in one lifetime in so many different fields, and he would tap into himself, and I forgot the words, but I mean, he could do great poetry and art and just so many different things in one lifetime. And when I read your bio, Mellon, with everything that you've done, I'm like, this guy's another Walter Russell. That's exactly what I said, and to myself. And so can you talk a little bit about um, when you came back and getting into inventions, and I know this is a broad question, but like you're still tapped into the light, and you're just a man of miracles, I think. I mean, you're incredible.
Well, thank you. I've never, for me, it's always been very clear and fearless.
Mhm.
This is why, I actually am documented for helping decode a genetic disease at a university and things like that. But
Oh,
I don't go
congratulations,
in with any
incredible.
pretension,
Uh-huh.
and I don't go into these projects with any investment in my ego. I really don't. It either happens or it doesn't.
Okay.
And usually it's happened with very useful information for think tanks and corporations and things over the years. But I go in just clear and I just give it a shot. But what we learned over the years and working with a lot of people, the other thing that Ken Ring discovered was that he had, until he met me, he'd never met a near-deather that goes back to the light at will every day. In fact, I go back every day, and I can go back for ideas, think tanks, or other things. And so he set up an experiment at the University of Texas. That really kind of put me on the map. They really tested me, and I was able to retrieve information I would have no knowledge or experience or training in that was
Cool.
accurate and useful. So that was interesting. But I go back to the light at will, and a lot of people have asked me, how do you do that?
And what
And
do you
I say
tell them?
it's, well,
Somebody who
I
wants to
first
know?
I say it's one of these things like music. You can learn it. I don't know if it can be taught, but you can learn it. Like studying with a shaman or something, but
Hmm.
it's not an intellectual process. It's an emotion. The best thing you can do to get to the light is have an emotional connection to it. And I never forgot that first moment of being with the light. You know the feeling. It's like, whoa. I never forgot that, and that still gives me like a kundalini effect up my neck every time I even think about it. So I get this rush, and so I came out of this whole thing. With no fear of death. Of course, I don't want to suffer. But
No,
although
no.
I lost the fear of death, and I know we're going to live many, many lives to come. What I did do was I respected life, and so before my near-death experience, I was a rock climber, a skydiver, and other things, and I stopped all of that in respect for life because I want to live a long, useful life and do planet work. So why throw myself out of an airplane or
Hmm.
climb rocks?
Yep. You've
It
got a
just
lot more
became more, it
life in
became
you
more
and things to
important.
give and
Yeah.
ways of making a difference.
So it changed me in that way, and then I've never put out my own book because the light told me not to sell my book, but to give it away, and that's what I've done
Oh,
over the years.
which is funny because I typed your name into Amazon, like this guy must have a book, and you're written about in so many other books.
Right.
And so, I know you have a DVD set and some other things, but it's just like, you really do leave, and I think others as well as myself, wanting more because
Hmm.
you've given us a present that we just are getting a little peek at, and it's like we want what's inside, and it's opening up a new world.
Yeah, so I do plan to put out books now in my life, like ebook and stuff like that,
Hmm.
and also that's why I produced the DVD Spirit of Gaia, which is all the great lessons I've learned from the light, and that's doing very good around the world. It's really resonating with people.
Well, I'll get that for sure.
Uh, uh,
Wow.
yeah.
There's more I want to ask
So,
you, but now I'm speechless and I'm like thoughtless. I'm in this point where what do I even say? What you've done, Mellon, is because I like I said, I studied about Walter Russell, and I always remember that he'd just tap inside that part of himself, the cosmic consciousness. A course in cosmic consciousness, I think, is what his home study course I did was, and just to be talking to a person that connects with that intelligence, the light, and like Walter Russell's long gone. I think he died in 66 or 64 or something. And to be talking to you now, like this is all possible. It takes something that previously seems like make believe, and no, this is reality. And so to know this is all real, it leaves me with a whole new access of how we can live life. I mean, I may not be someone who can connect with the light at will right now, or I may not ever be, but just based on everything you have said, there's a whole new way I can live my life with the trust that there is a much bigger picture. Oh, I do want to ask you something, because I do have a friend who's got brain cancer, and she had a tumor removed, and that did not cure it, and I don't know how she's doing right now, but she's doing a lot of prayer, and I think she's struggling right now. Everybody is physically going to die someday. And what do you say to people that may not have the spontaneous remission or the miracle, to give them either some hope, or is there the possibility of healing, or are some things just out of our hands?
Well, it depends on what you really believe, and a lot of people never got to know themselves, what they really believe inside, and that's why, when I did hospice work for a while, and I also counsel, terminal people also over the many years, and try to give them this insight. A lot of people just haven't got to know themselves because that's not what we do in this culture, and it's not what they teach us to do. There may be a belief in there that's triggering all this, and if that belief isn't cleared, then you suffer the consequences of it. So, but the other thing too is that the first thing I ask them is, I try to talk to them about there is no death. That's why I try to teach reincarnation. But there is no death. There's many mansions for us and many lives, and I try to get them into that mode. But also, I have to ask them the question, just honestly and genuinely, let's go deep here. Do you want to live, or is this incarnation finished? Because, and you'd be surprised. I mean, there have been people who have gotten great relief by going, oh, yeah, I'm finished with this incarnation. I'm done. And, then you just want to go out peaceably. Now, on the other hand, people that really want to live, I say, well, it's miracle time. It's miracle time now. The universe, everything in the universe is supposed to be impossible. The
Yes.
entire universe is impossible. So we're living in a huge miracle, and we're part of this miracle. And what the light has told me is that why people don't see that many miracles in the modern world is that you've got to take the time and make the space for a miracle in your life. You can run all over the world trying to see holy men, but unless you take the time and make the space, in your life, you'll find miracles happen more often. But and there are healers I recommend that I would go to, and all of them are in America. I think the best ones I've ever seen are in America, and I love to work with healers that are not afraid to be tested by universities.
That's cool.
I just don't go to shamans in the jungle, although I've known many. I've spent many time in caves in the jungles with shamans. But for me, I just rather know that someone's been open to be tested, has been documented, and so I sometimes recommend 2 or 3 of these people, and they've actually helped a number of people over the years. But it's miracle time, If you really want to live, it's miracle time. Let's take the time and make a space.
Can people get in touch with you and ask questions? I mean, are you?
Well, I don't do any medical thing
No,
at all.
I don't mean that. But if somebody needs a recommendation for one of those people you just mentioned,
yeah.
That's possible. And
definitely.
I also know, I don't know, this is my instinct. My dad fought cancer and died. So that's just what happened. And we tried everything to bring healing and have the miracle happen, and it didn't. So what I also know, just based on my own life, it is that it is out of the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Dad went the way he did, but without that, Mellon, I would have never become the person I am today. I would have never done as much research as I've done. I would never have learned so much about grief. I would have never written this book, and I would have never met you. So although it'd be nice to still have my dad here, what's become available after his passing is a whole life and a whole way of connecting people to some phenomenal things that wouldn't be available. So, I don't have the answers of who gets to live and who gets to die, but I do know we all play full out.
It's true. There's some people believe that there are no accidents, but I asked the light about that, and the light said, well, there has to be. Do you have a free universe? This is not a preordained universe. It's completely free-range universe. And so sometimes you can get these terminal conditions, whether it be an accident or a toxic event or toxic environment that you're living in a family or so. So, sometimes it's not your fault that you got a cancer or got sick. It's not your fault. These things happen, and we deal with them as best we can.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is your fault, though. Sometimes you really work on it. You know what I mean?
Right, and we go looking. I mean, we have to do that soul discovery. But one thing,
like my mother smoked cigarettes all her life, and that got her.
Yeah.
Although, in one of my visitations with the light, we revisited that because all my mother's life, I told her every time she lit a cigarette that was going to kill her. And the light showed me the truth. And the truth is that most people that smoke get away with it. So don't tell people cigarettes are going to kill them, because most people actually get away with it.
I have a funny short story to tell you, and then we're going to conclude this episode. But I was on an airplane yesterday, and the woman sitting next to me told me the story about when her mom passed away. And her mom smoked for 93, well, not 93 years, but ever since she was 15, and she died at 93. And this woman said just before the mom passed away, she said, "Who's that man over there on the horse?" And she was seeing her husband, and she kind of a grouchy old thing. And the daughter says, "Well, that's Daddy. He's come to take you home." And she says, "Well, where's home?" And she says, "Well, that's heaven. And is it nice there?" And she says, "Well, I imagine so, because, God's there and Jesus is there." And then she says, "Get me a cigarette." And so the mother's in hospice, and she's asking for the cigarette, and the daughter says, "You really want me to light this, Mom?" And she says, "You know what? Don't light it." She says, "I don't want God to smell smoke on my clothes." And then she passed away not too much longer.
That's a great story. Yeah.
And that came from a lady I sat next to on the airplane yesterday. Mellon, thank you so much. Oh,
sure.
I just want to hug you and meet you and get your DVD set and learn more, and then have you back on to ask more questions. Hopefully that's okay. You really
Sure, I'd love to.
are a wonderful man. And just a quick question. People that I've talked to that have had near-death experiences, they remember them like they were just yesterday, as opposed to some other memory we've had from the past, or maybe a dream. Is it the same with you, that it's just as clear and...
Absolutely.
That's cool.
I often say it actually seemed like it took 1 second, but it's taken me 30 years to tell the story. And I remember every bit of it. It just you just never get over it, really.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm like a little kid with a big Christmas present that I just opened.
Thank you so much, Sandra.
Yeah, how do people get to your website?
You can just go to Mellen, Mellen, Mellen-Thomas.com. And you can that'll lead you to another site I have for inventions and things like that, so you'll get to explore a lot of things that I do.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
exciting. You're the modern day Walter Russell to me, even though you're your own person. But I'm so excited to learn more. Thank you so much. And to our listener who spent time with us today, thank you for listening. I want to remind everybody to go to WeDon'tDieRadio.com if you're curious to see what Mellen-Thomas Benedict looks like. I've got his picture, I've got his bio, and you can tell your friends and just press play beneath his picture. And again, thank you. My name is Sandra Champlain. I believe that life is an education for the soul and that your life here is important. And remember what Mellon said, who and what is not God. That means God is within you, God is within everyone you see, and I really believe the message Mellon has, and just with this interview today, can lead to a whole new way of living our life today, tomorrow, if we embrace it. So check out Mellen-Thomas.com, and again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.